The crystal wine glass smashed onto the hardwood, red wine spilling like a river of rage. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was the cold splash of wine that had hit me just seconds earlier, soaking my shirt, stinging my eyes, dripping down my hair. My father-in-law, Gideon Whitaker, stood at the head of the table, an empty glass clutched in his hand, his expression a mix of pride and contempt. Across the table, my wife's younger sister, Sabrina, was doubled over in laughter, clutching the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Thanks, Dad," she wheezed between giggles. "Maybe that'll teach him some respect, filthy pig." My fingers dug into the chair beneath me. Every eye in the room was on me. My wife, Clara, was frozen, unreadable. Her mother, Daphne, had her hand pressed to her mouth, caught somewhere between shock and amusement. Her brother, Liam, stared at his plate like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. And Gideon, well, he looked like a hero in his own twisted story. I stood slowly. The room went silent, except for Sabrina's fading cackles. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I had hoped never to use at a family gathering. "Marcus," I said when the line connected. "It's time. Execute everything we discussed." I hung up. The silence in the room thickened. Even Sabrina had stopped laughing. They had no idea what was coming. No clue what I had built, what I controlled, or the storm that was about to hit them. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm 42, and until that New Year's Eve dinner, people would have called me mild-mannered, unassuming, a quiet finance professional. What they didn't know is that quiet doesn't mean weak, and unassuming doesn't mean powerless. I'd spent 15 years quietly building something bigger than the Whitaker family could imagine. And the past 6 months had been a countdown to this exact night. Before we go any further, please subscribe and like this video, and listen to my story till the end. Drop a comment letting me know which city you're watching from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The Whitakers had never respected me. From the day I married Clara 8 years ago, I was the outsider. The one without old money, without pedigree, without the right last name to belong in their country club, charity gala world. Gideon had built his fortune in real estate, bought low, sold high, and now he strutted around as if he were untouchable. Yet his disdain for me was a delicious irony because I'd become more successful than him, without any of his help. He'd always introduce me at parties with that venomous smile. "Ethan works in finance," he'd say, dripping condescension. "Some kind of investment thing. I can't even wrap my head around it." The truth? Gideon knew exactly what I did. And it made him hate me more. I ran a private equity fund that specialized in turning failing companies and underperforming commercial properties into profitable ventures. My fund managed over $300 million, and I personally held about $70 million. But they thought I was just Ethan, the polite husband who nodded and swallowed their insults without complaint. Clara knew, of course. She saw my bank statements, signed tax returns, witnessed the growth firsthand, but she never corrected her family's assumptions. And that should have been my first warning. The cracks started small. Gideon would comment on my suits. "Ethan, did you buy that at wherever?" Liam would subtly hint that his law career was somehow more respectable. Daphne would casually ask when we'd moved to a bigger house, as if our 4-bedroom colonial were inadequate. And Sabrina, oh, she was cruel. She'd married Bradley Carrington, a hedge fund manager who loved talking about his bonuses. At every gathering, she'd asked me, smirking, "So Ethan, what kind of returns does your little fund get?" I'd smile politely and change the topic. Let them believe what they wanted. My fund averaged 42% returns a decade running, but I learned early that the Whitakers weren't interested in facts. Only in keeping me small. Clara had been different when we met. Independent, sharp, brilliant. We connected over art, economics, debates that went late into the night. But slowly, year by year, she drifted back into her family's orbit, absorbing their attitudes, reflecting their disdain, until that night, when I realized something had irrevocably changed. 6 months before that New Year's Eve, I noticed her odd behavior: phone calls in other rooms, late-night book clubs, excessive trips to salons. I wasn't blind. I hired a private investigator, Marcus Fleming, a former FBI agent turned discreet investigator. Within 2 weeks, Marcus delivered the truth: Clara was seeing someone else. A gallery owner named Julian Pierce. 3 times a week. Messages filled with mockery of me. Ethan has no idea, just sits there with spreadsheets. And the one that stung the most: he's exactly what my father said. A nobody pretending to be somebody. Sitting in my office reading those messages, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. The woman I married was gone, if she'd ever truly been there. And that's when I began to plan. Gideon Whitaker's empire, the family fortune they paraded around, was full of cracks. Older commercial buildings with expiring mortgages, underperforming tenants, and major properties at risk. I quietly set my pieces into position, documenting every weakness. Even Liam, Bradley, and Daphne had secrets. By New Year's Eve, I had the full picture. All that was left was the perfect moment, and they handed it to me. If you're already on the edge of your seat, hit that like button because part 2 is where the tension explodes. And drop a comment letting me know, have you ever had someone humiliate you in front of family? How did it feel? In part 2, the wine hits my face, and what happens next changes everything: family, fortune, and revenge. You won't believe the storm I unleash next. The first drop of wine hit my cheek like a slap. Then another. Cold, wet, stinging, soaking into my hair, my eyes, my shirt. Gideon stood there smirking, like he had just won some twisted game. Sabrina's laughter erupted again, cruel and sharp, echoing around the grand dining room. I could feel the heat of fury rising in my chest, but underneath it, a quiet, cold calculation. I gripped the chair harder, feeling the wood dig into my palms. Every laugh, every sneer, every tiny insult over the past 8 years had led to this moment. And now, they had just handed me the opening I'd been waiting for. I pulled out my phone. "Marcus," I said, steady despite the storm coursing through me. "It's time. Execute the plan." The room froze. Even Sabrina's laughter died mid-giggle. Clara's eyes widened, confusion and a flicker of fear crossing her face. This wasn't how her family dinners usually went. And now, they had no idea what was coming. For 8 years, the Whitakers had treated me like a joke, a nobody, a man unworthy of their family name. Gideon had belittled me at every turn, subtly, overtly, sometimes painfully clever, sometimes shamelessly cruel. He had a real estate empire worth millions, but to him, I was just Ethan, the quiet son-in-law who didn't measure up. But quiet doesn't mean powerless. And unassuming doesn't mean weak. Over the past 6 months, I had quietly built my strategy. Every property, every mortgage note, every family secret carefully documented. I knew Gideon's empire was fragile: underoccupied buildings, expiring leases, properties about to default. Liam's law firm was struggling, Bradley's hedge fund was hemorrhaging investors, and Daphne, well, her lavish spending was finally catching up with her. I stayed seated, letting the tension build. Gideon's chest puffed out as if he'd just performed heroically. Sabrina's giggles had faded to anxious snickers. Clara's face was pale, uncertain. I finally spoke, calm, deliberate. "Clara," I said, "I'm done being treated like I'm nothing. I'm done with this family mocking me, belittling me, and throwing wine in my face." She looked at me, startled. "Ethan, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I continued, voice steady, "the marriage is over. Divorce papers will be served tomorrow. And Gideon, you're about to learn exactly how fragile your empire is." Shock rippled across the table. Sabrina gasped. Liam's fork clattered to the floor. Daphne's hand flew to her mouth, genuine this time, no pretense. Gideon's face turned the color of a raw steak. "You can't," he started, voice shaking with rage. "I just did," I interrupted gently. "The wine wasn't just offensive. It's documented assault. And all your properties? I hold the mortgage notes. You're currently late on 3 of them. I could have let you recover, but I won't. Not anymore. Clara's lips parted in disbelief. Ethan, you're insane. Perhaps, I said, but I'm also done being powerless. I outlined quietly, matter-of-factly, the collapse that awaited them: foreclosure on his flagship building, Liam losing his biggest client, Bradley hemorrhaging hedge fund investors, and Daphne's secret debts exposed. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. Each word landed like a hammer on their fragile sense of superiority. The room had descended into chaos. Gasping, muttering, whispered arguments, some trying to negotiate, others frozen in shock. And all the while, I sat there, calm, watching, savoring the clarity that comes from finally taking control. Then I turned to Clara. Her eyes welled with tears, her voice trembling. Ethan, what about us? I shook my head, feeling no anger toward her anymore, only disappointment. This isn't about Julian, not really. It's about who you became. Or maybe who you always were. You let your family treat me like nothing. And when someone else appeared more exciting, you jumped. I loved the woman I thought you were. You didn't exist anymore. Sabrina sniffled, finally losing her bravado. Gideon's jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Liam's face was as pale as his fork. Daphne couldn't stop crying. And me? I finally felt free. The wine had been the spark. But the fire, that had been months in the making. If this has you gripping your chair, make sure to hit the like button and comment below. Have you ever been humiliated in front of your family? How did you handle it? Part 3 will show exactly how I begin to dismantle their empire, piece by piece. In Part 3, the Whitakers realize too late that I'm not just reacting, I've been planning for this. The tables are about to turn, and nothing will ever be the same. The next 72 hours felt unreal. My phone buzzed nonstop, like it was possessed. Calls, texts, voicemails piling on top of each other, voices shifting from rage to panic to pleading. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to anymore. The first call came just after midnight. Clara. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then again. And again. By morning, there were 12 missed calls and 4 voicemails. I deleted none of them. I wanted the record. Every sob, every shaky apology, every "Please, Ethan, just talk to me," stayed exactly where it was. Marcus worked fast. Faster than I expected. Court filings went out before New Year's Day brunches were even over. Divorce papers served. Asset freezes initiated. Foreclosure notices drafted and scheduled. By the time Gideon finished telling himself this was all a bluff, it was already too late. On January 2nd, his phone rang. Then rang again. Banks don't yell, but they don't need to. Their silence is colder. Mortgage notes called. Extensions denied. Grace periods revoked. Gideon had spent decades believing relationships would save him. He never imagined the numbers would finally speak louder. Liam's problems surfaced next. His firm lost its biggest client overnight. No warning. No discussion. Just a polite email requesting new representation. I imagined him staring at his screen, rereading it over and over, feeling that hollow drop in his stomach. The one where reality finally sinks in. Sabrina tried to laugh it off at first. I heard later she told friends it was temporary. Bad things like this blow over. But then Bradley's fund reports leaked. Investors pulled out. Meetings turned tense. Smiles vanished. The man who used to brag at every dinner suddenly couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Ha ha ha, life has a way of humbling people fast. And Daphne, that one hurt in a different way. Her secret loans surfaced. Statements stacked higher than excuses. She cried real tears this time. Not the polite kind. The broken kind. The kind that shake your shoulders and steal your breath. But even then, I didn't feel guilt. I felt finality. Clara finally cornered me on the 3rd day. She showed up at my office unannounced, eyes red, makeup streaked, voice trembling. "You're destroying my family," she whispered, like saying it quietly might make it less true. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just distance. No, I said calmly. I'm holding them accountable. There's a difference, she cried then. Full on, quiet sobs, hands shaking. My dad made a mistake. He was drunk. I nodded slowly. Your father made choices for 8 years. So did you. Silence fell between us. Heavy. Crushing. She tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. I know about Julian, I said softly. Her face collapsed. Completely. Like the ground had vanished beneath her. Ethan. I know everything, I continued. The messages. The jokes. The way you talked about me like I was invisible. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. So please don't cry like this just happened. This started months ago. She wept then. Real weeping. The kind that sounds broken. But something inside me stayed still. Cold. Clear. I walked her to the door myself. No yelling. No drama. Just the end. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, city lights flickering outside the window, and for the first time in years, I slept. Deeply. No tight chest. No rehearsed conversations in my head. Just silence. Peaceful, earned silence. They had mistaken my patience for weakness. My silence for ignorance. My kindness for permission. They were wrong. If this part hit you right in the chest, tap the like button and take a breath. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from people you once loved just to save yourself? In part 4, the fallout becomes public. Reputations crumble, masks come off, and the family that once laughed at me realizes there's no going back. The real consequences are just beginning. The next morning, the fallout hit like a storm. Gideon's phone didn't stop ringing, and every call felt like a nail being driven into the wall of his ego. Foreclosure notices were official. His flagship property, the Whitaker Tower, was in jeopardy, and the banks weren't bending. Tenants were asking about relocation options. Ha ha ha, the man who once laughed at me, claiming, numbers aren't everything, now faced numbers that wouldn't lie. Liam's law firm spiraled faster than anyone expected. The Hendricks account, his pride, his biggest client, was gone. Hushed meetings turned into panic-filled conferences. Papers rustled. Phones buzzed. His face, pale and strained, told a story that no one dared to speak aloud. Sabrina and Bradley fared worse. Investor withdrawals on his hedge fund surged. Clients panicked. Hushed conversations became heated arguments. Bradley's face went green, hands shaking as he tried to reassure her that everything is under control. Sabrina's laughter, the weapon she wielded at dinner, was gone. In its place, fear. A soft, almost helpless weeping when she realized that bragging about wealth and status wouldn't save her now. Daphne, she was a sight. Her carefully curated image of sophistication shattered. Her secret loans, her shopping habits, everything she had hidden was suddenly exposed. Tears fell freely, shaking her shoulders, hands trembling. I didn't intervene. I watched from afar, understanding that sometimes the most powerful justice isn't delivered with words. It's watching people face the consequences of their choices. Clara tried reaching me again. Calls, texts, messages begging for a conversation. I ignored them. Each one felt like a reminder of months of betrayal, and now it was her turn to feel powerless. By the second week, whispers spread through the city. Gideon Whitaker, once untouchable, was publicly overextended. Headlines hinted at foreclosures and failing properties. Colleagues who had once sought his advice now avoided him. The empire he had built on arrogance and connections was unraveling, and all it took was one man who refused to be humiliated. I sat in my office, overlooking the skyline, thinking about the irony. For years, they treated me like nothing. Tonight, they would watch everything crumble, and I wouldn't have lifted a finger in anger. Just precision. Just patience. I leaned back, a small smile forming. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about rage, it was about proof. Proof that their cruelty had no power over me, no matter how loudly they laughed, or how cruelly they mocked. Clara finally came in one last time, tears streaked, voice trembling. "Ethan, please, can we—" "No," I said quietly. "There's nothing to rebuild here. This isn't about Julian. This is about who you allowed yourself to become. Who you agreed to be in order to fit into their world. That's the real betrayal." She wept in silence. Her shoulders shook, her hands wringing uselessly, and I let her. Not with satisfaction, just with the calm knowledge that truth had finally arrived. Gideon tried to speak, tried to assert control, tried to convince me I was overreacting. I let him speak. His words were desperate, shaky, absurd. And when he finished, I didn't respond. Words had failed him. Numbers, records, strategy, they wouldn't. The Whitaker family had been so confident, so untouchable, laughing at me, sneering, mocking. And now they were fragile. They had no idea how long I had been planning, how much I had gathered, how unstoppable the consequences would be. It wasn't just business. It wasn't just revenge. It was justice served in full. And they had no one to blame but themselves. If you're feeling the tension rise, hit that like button and comment below. Have you ever seen someone face the consequences of underestimating you? How did it feel watching it unfold? Part 5 will reveal the final resolutions, divorces finalized, empires broken, and a new chapter beginning. And this time, the story ends with freedom, strength, and a chance at love. You won't want to miss it. By mid-January, everything had shifted. The Whitaker empire was cracking, and the family that once laughed at me now scrambled to pick up the pieces. Gideon's flagship building had been foreclosed, sold to a development company for a hefty profit, but the irony was delicious. The buyer planned to renovate and modernize it, doing what Gideon had neglected for decades. Sometimes karma comes with a renovation permit. Liam's law firm survived barely. The Hendricks account was gone, replaced by clients who actually demanded competence. Bradley's hedge fund collapsed. Sabrina divorced him within months. Daphne downsized her life, moving into a smaller house, tears falling as she realized that appearances could no longer protect her. Clara moved to California, starting over at a gallery she had once dreamed about before family pressures swallowed her ambition. She sent no messages, made no attempts. The woman I had loved, or thought I had loved, became a ghost of what could have been. As for me, I finally breathed. My fund grew to over $400 million in assets under management. Properties in the downtown core multiplied, negotiations for new acquisitions kept me busy, but in the best way possible. I had built a life I controlled, a life I could trust. And then she walked in. Amanda Richardson. Auburn hair, intelligent eyes, and the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. A curator at the Contemporary Art Museum, passionate, driven, and entirely unimpressed by wealth or status. She had a spark that made the air in the room feel electric. "I need your support," she said bluntly, and I laughed. Not at her, but at the honesty. She was refreshing in a world full of pretension. An hour of discussion turned into plans, visions, shared dreams. I pledged $5 million to the museum expansion, and she accepted a dinner invitation with a smile that made my chest tighten in a good way. The Whitakers faded from my life. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching them face reality was enough. And for the first time, I felt light, unburdened, free. Months later, Amanda moved in, on her terms, maintaining her independence, her space, her life. Not out of necessity, but choice. And that was exactly the kind of partnership I had always wanted. On New Year's Eve, exactly 2 years after the infamous wine incident, Amanda and I hosted a dinner at my penthouse. Friends from the fund, from the art world, and a few trusted allies celebrated the night with laughter, champagne, and warmth. On the balcony, away from the chatter, Amanda looked at me and smiled. "You know what I love about you?" I smirked, teasing. "Your devastating good looks and charm?" She laughed, eyes twinkling. Well, yes. But no. I love that you know your worth. You don't need anyone to validate you. You just are. I pulled her close, the city lights sparkling beneath us. The cold January air felt electric. The lessons had been hard. The wine, the betrayal, the family's cruelty, all of it had carved me into someone stronger. The Whitakers had thought they were teaching me a lesson when they treated me like I wasn't enough. What they really taught me was this: being good enough for the wrong people means nothing. Success is meaningless without respect. Love is hollow without loyalty. And sometimes, the people who tried to put you in your place are the ones who set you free. We stood there in silence, holding each other, listening to the distant celebrations, and I realized the ultimate truth: the best revenge isn't destruction. The best revenge is a life so good, so full, so untouchable, that those who doubted you can't reach it, no matter how hard they try. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Amanda and I returned inside, laughter spilling into the room, clinking glasses, the warmth of life replacing years of tension and betrayal. The past had taught me one thing: no one can define your worth but you. And I would never allow anyone else to do it again. Wine in the face, betrayal, family mocking, empires crumbling, all of it had been a lesson in clarity, resilience, and finally freedom. And for the first time in years I felt whole. If this story inspired you, share your own experience in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic people, reclaim your power, or rebuild your life after betrayal? You're not alone. Hit like, share your story, and subscribe for more real tales of strength and justice.